वो लोगों
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
जो ईमान लाए हो
Translation is, O ye people who have believed,
उसी तरह फर्ज कर दिए गए
fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may become righteous. Huzur says that by the grace of Allah, once again we have been enabled to pass through another month of Ramadan, which has already started from yesterday. During this month, a large number of Muslims, along with the Roza, the fasting, they also come to the mosque for the prayers and the Tarawih, and they are reminded of that in our mosques as well during these days as compared with the normal days. More and more people come. This verse which I have recited nowadays on MTA, this is being recited and broadcast on MTA. This is to remind everyone that the fasting which has been made obligatory, the purpose is to become righteous. In previous religions as well, the fasting was obligatory. The purpose of that was also righteousness. Now the followers of those religions, they are just following the teaching in name, but they do not act according to that, and nor they have the quality of righteousness in them. But Islam is a permanent religion, everlasting, going to remain till the end of the days, and its teaching is permanent, everlasting. And the Holy Quran, in all the parts of the globe, it is well preserved in its original pure form. And for those who follow the path of righteousness, there is a guidance in that for those people, or those people who follow its guidance. Such people will always be those who follow the righteousness, and there is a guidance for those people. And then in the period of latter days, for our affirmation and the propagation of the Holy Quran, and to remind the people to act upon those teachings and to show them the way, Allah the Almighty has sent the promised Messiah ﷺ, and we have been enabled to believe in him. So therefore it's a great responsibility of us Ahmadis that we should understand the reality of fasting and try to achieve that objective, which is the objective of Ramadan, and that is to say, to acquire the quality of righteousness and to make further progress in the field of righteousness. In the verses after this verse which I have recited regarding the fasting, Allah Almighty has mentioned further details, and the details which I have been mentioned, they are regarding the reading of the Holy Quran and to observe the commandments of Allah and pay attention to the prayers. And the gist of all these instruction is has been mentioned in this word of the verse, which says that the purpose is righteousness. So therefore, to act upon the commandments of Allah Almighty and the attention to His worship, that is there. But during this month, particularly during this month, do your best so that forever you become regular in complying with that and to make it a part of your life, and that should become easy for you. So therefore, during the month of Ramadan, when you try to achieve the quality of righteousness or you become like that, so then naturally you will be paying more attention to your worship. If we try to follow the path of righteousness, if we observe the fast, so then we will be reminded to abstain from vices. We should find out the commandments of Allah Almighty, and to follow that, we will be reminded of that. If we do not abstain from vices, whether these vices are related to ourselves or which are going to affect other people, by leaving aside those things, we can achieve the objective. If we are not following and we are not abandoning those things, then the purpose of the fasting is not complete. And this is righteousness. If even when we observe the fast, we have arrogance in us, and in our deeds and works, we are having undue pride about that. Self-praise is our habit, or we wish that people should praise us. And regarding, they like the people who are subordinate to them should praise them, and whosoever praises, they are very happy with that, or they wish to have this. This is not righteousness at all. During the fast, the fighting, the falsehood and disorder, the people who are not abstaining from these things, so then this is not righteousness. During the fast, the worship and prayers and in good deeds, if we are not spending our time in those things, then this is not righteousness. The purpose of the fast is not accomplished in that case. So therefore, during the month of Ramadan, to abandon and leave aside the vices and to acquire the good qualities, this is actually the purpose. This is the thing through which we achieve the purpose of fasting. And if we try to become steadfast in this effort, so then in reality, we will be able among those who find the objective of fasting. Otherwise, fasting will only be a starvation for them. The Holy Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that Allah Almighty does not stand in need that you should go hungry if you do not do the good deeds. Some people are such, those who in the name of fast, they show that they are observing the fast but deceive the people, but actually because they are not actually observing the fast. So these are the people who can have no control over their eating just for a few hours for the sake of Allah. They cannot stop themselves from eating. So those people in other matters, how they are going to control their passions in other matters? It's only yesterday in the Muslims today, there was a survey published regarding the Muslims in relation to the fasting, and they have come to the conclusion that majority of the youngsters, they just observe the fast just for the purpose of show off, and they do not know the real purpose of fast. They interviewed one young man. One Christian took the interview, or atheist, or anyway non-Muslim. The youngster replied that yes, in the morning I had my sehri, and I started the fast with my parents, and very regularly the arrangement of the morning food and the dinner is made. My mother is 64 and he is suffering from diabetes, and she observed the fasting, and very regularly, despite all that, for the iftar she prepares so many things for us, and when we go, we will enjoy the iftar. And the young man said, this pressure of society is such that in order to show to our families, I do show that I am observing the fast and I had the sehri in the morning, but at lunchtime I had just fish and chips. And he said that here in England, there are thousands of people like me who observe such a fast. So this is the reality about the fast of some people. And there were some, even if they go without food for the whole day, but they are not paying any attention to worship and prayers as they should be paying it. They offer one prayer or so, and that's the end. The do's and don'ts of Allah Almighty, they don't pay any attention to that. Such fasting, they do not fulfill the objective for which Allah Almighty has fixed for us, that you should acquire the quality of righteousness. So it's a great responsibility of us all Ahmadis that after believing the promised Messiah ﷺ, we have to do justice to our fast in such a way as it is expected from us and Allah Almighty has ordained for us, and try to understand what is righteousness and how we are going to adopt this quality of righteousness. Hadhrat Massih on various occasions regarding Taqwa, he has explained and he has told us who is a righteous person. The real player is actually there as a result of righteousness, and not there is any player in the worldly amenities. And how we should be performing the good deeds. And a person, in order to become a true believer, everything that he does, he should do it for the sake of acquiring the pleasure of Allah Almighty. And this is one thing which makes a clear distinction between a believer and a non-believer. And he also told us that in the true perception of Allah Almighty, one should go on becoming firm and firm. And every coming day should see that we are moving forward in the true perception of Allah Almighty. And not that we stand in one place, or we become like those people who for some reason just observe the fast just for the sake of show off, as I have just given you example. Rather, they should be increasing in the quality of righteousness. Today anyway, I am going to mention certain quotations regarding the subject of righteousness, the Taqwa. Hadhrat promised Messiah ﷺ, in order to get the pleasure of Allah Almighty, advising us to have the quality of righteousness, he mentions one of his own revelation. He says that, and also he's telling us that Taqwa is something which was mentioned in old scriptures, and this is the gist of that. And he says that, he says yesterday, it was 22nd June 1999, that many times I got the revelation from Allah that you all become righteous people and try to follow the fine ways of righteousness. Then Allah Almighty will be with you. He said that I felt great pain in my heart, that what should I do? That each and every member of my community should acquire the true quality of righteousness. And then he said, I pray so much that sometime in my prayer I feel weakness, and sometime it becomes like I feel dizzy. And unless a person becomes truly righteous in the way of Allah Almighty, he is not able to get the help from Allah. He said the righteousness is the gist of all the true revelations, scriptures, and the Holy Quran in one word has mentioned the total pleasure of Allah Almighty. In the word of Taqwa, Allah Almighty has mentioned that. And he said, I am in great desire that there should be true righteous people in my community, those who prefer religion to the worldly things. And I want to separate these people and to give them, delegate some responsibilities to them. And those people who are inclined to the worldly things, I will not take care of those people. I will pay no attention to them. So he was very keen that each and every member of my community should be following the path of righteousness, and not that the worldly worries should overpower him, occupy his mind. And he says that this is the gist of the religion, the righteousness. If you want to get the pleasure of Allah Almighty, then become righteous. And the people should follow the path of righteousness, because taqwa, righteousness, is one thing which can be described as the gist of religion. And if the religion is to be mentioned briefly, then the central point of that is righteousness, the real kernel. And there are various stages of righteousness. But if a true seeker after truth, being in that position, if he covers the earlier stages in dedication and devotion, then because of his sincerity, he is able to achieve higher stages. So therefore, steadfastness, every good thing, whether it is small or big, one should pay attention to that. And he says that Allah Almighty says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ, that Allah the Almighty accepts the prayers of the righteous people. So we can say this is the promise of Allah, and there is no weakness in the fulfillment of these promises. As Allah Almighty says, Inna Allah la yukhliful miyad. Allah Almighty does not go away from fulfilling His promises. And this is one of the fundamental condition of the acceptance of prayer, which cannot be taken away. The righteous is very much essential for the acceptance of prayer. He said that a person, if he is indifferent and he is not paying full attention, so he seeks to get the guidance. Is he not a madman? This is the requirement, and this is the duty of all members of the community, that they should follow the path of righteousness, so that the effect of the true belief and the faith should be becoming stronger, and one should get a partake from that. So benefiting from the days of Ramadan. And in order to get the benefits of Ramadan, this is the basic recipe, that all our fasting and every action that we do, that should be for the sake of acquiring taqwa and righteousness. And people say that our prayers are not accepted. I prayed very hard, but they are not accepted. First of all, they should see in themselves whether they are really truly following the path of righteousness, or they are following the path of the worldly things. This is one of the conditions for the acceptance of prayer, that they should follow the path of righteousness. And then he says that as a matter of fact, for the righteous people, there are a lot of big promises. And what could be the greater promise than that? That Allah Almighty becomes the friend of righteous people. And false are those people who say that we are closer to God Almighty, but they are not righteous, and they are spending the life of vice and sin. And while the fact is that they attribute all this status, that we are the friends of Allah, they attribute this status to them, because Allah Almighty has put a condition with the friend, that he must be a righteous one. And then Allah Almighty puts another condition. Or you can say that there is a sign of the righteous people, Inna Allah ma'allazina taqaw, that Allah Almighty is with those people and always helps them who are really righteous people. The proof of the Allah Almighty with them is attained through His help. And if Allah Almighty is helping, then you can believe that Allah Almighty is with you. The first door, the door of friendship, is closed in the way, and the second door would be closed of these sins in this way. The people say that the doors of friendship of Allah is closed. They also want to close the door of the help of Allah Almighty. He says that this help of Allah Almighty cannot be attained by vicious people, wicked people. The help of Allah Almighty is always with those people who are righteous. And then he says there is another path, that a person, when he suffers tribulations and difficulties, and in that condition, and the quality of righteousness is there in order to get the problems resolved. If you want to have this, then you can fulfill your objective through quality of righteousness. And he said, if you are financially tight and if your difficulties are there, the way of deliverance from that is righteousness. Allah Almighty says, "Man yattaqillaha yaj'al lahu makhraja wa yarzuqhu min haythu la yahtasib." Allah Almighty, for the righteous person in every difficulty, creates a way out for him. And from unseen, Allah Almighty makes the provision of getting delivered from sin. And He helps him in such a way that he even does not know. So this point should be thought very carefully. That وَاتَّقُوا وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. This point should be remembered very clearly. If one remembers all the time, then one is reminded of following the path of righteousness. And then he says that now you ponder that what does a man wants in this life? The greatest desire of a person is that he should be always at ease and pleasure. And for that Allah Almighty has defined one path, that is the path of righteousness. And in other words, that is called the path of the Holy Quran. Or this name is Sirat-e-Mustaqim, the straight path. And one should not say that the non-believers, they have all the wealth and they are lost in their enjoyments and entertainments. Allah Almighty says, He says that I tell you honestly, they are not. They appear so in the eyes of those people who are wicked, but actually inside their heart there is agony and anguish in their hearts. And I have seen many people. But I always see the hearts of these people. They are bound in chains and they are burning in fire. They are chained in those in the chains. As Allah Almighty says, "Inna ata lil kafirina salasala wa aghlalam wa sayra." That certainly for the non-believers we have prepared the chains and the hell for the non-believers, and they cannot come to the path of piety. They are the people who are gone away, and they are so much deviated from the path. They are becoming even worse than the animals. Their eyes is always inclined towards earth, and they turn to earth, and continue to do so. And inside their heart there is an anguish and uneasiness. And if the wealth gets less, or they are not successful in their endeavor, then they moan about that. And so much so that some of them, they turn mad, or they go to courts here and there. So this is the fact of the matter, that a irreligious person is not devoid of these things. And the people are burning in their heart. And we read this type of news and the publications in newspapers. The thing is that because these people do not have the real happiness, which is the natural result of the goodness. A person who is drunkard, he asks for more and more, and there is always a desire for that. Similarly, the desire of the worldly thing is there, and one is yearning for that, and he is burning. And this fire of burning does not extinguish. And Allah Almighty has given the promise that the person who is righteous, he is going to get to paradise. And explaining this point, and what is the standard of the righteousness? Hadhrat Promised Messiah ﷺ says, a muttaqi, the true happiness one can find out in a cottage, which a worldly person cannot find even in palace. If the person is contentment and the pleasure of Allah Almighty is the objective, then in lower situations as well a person can achieve that and one can get satisfaction. While very rich people, they cannot get that pleasure. He said that the more they get the world, the more the trials come in their way. So therefore remember that the true happiness and satisfaction is not for the worldly people. And don't think that because of the wealth and because of the good clothes and good food, they can become the means of pleasure. Not at all. Rather, the standard of righteousness, the happiness is in the righteousness. And all these things that tell us that without the true righteousness you cannot get the happiness. So then one should find out that there are so many aspects of taqwa which are spread like the web of the spider. And taqwa is all the beauty things and all the limbs of the body and the tongue and moral. It is all related to these things in their doctrines, in their belief, in the tongue, in the conversation, and also in the morals. Good morals should be there. There should be righteousness in that. With reference to fasting, there is a hadith. The Holy Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that you always keep your tongue clean. And if somebody tries to fight, the one should reply that I'm observing the fast, I can't reply you to what you say. The most sensitive thing is the tongue. Sometime forgetting righteousness, a person says something and then he becomes happy and he says that I said like this and this, while the fact is that the thing is bad. I have remembered one anecdote that this is also very important to note, that a person are fighting with other things, but in small things as well you can see that self-pride and arrogance and show-off, that is also something which is one of the mistakes committed by the tongue, or the shortcoming in the righteousness because of the tongue. It comes in that category. He said a very saintly person was invited for dinner. When that saintly person get for the food, and then arrogant host said that you bring that tray which we brought when we came for the first pilgrimage, and then bring the other one which we brought after the second pilgrimage, and then he said that bring the third one as well. Then that saintly person said that you are extremely miserable person. You have lost everything in these three statements. So you have done everything for the show off. You are completely far away from the quality of righteousness. That saintly person said that my intention was only this thing, that your purpose is that you have performed the pilgrimage 3 times. So therefore Allah Almighty has commanded that take care of your tongue and avoid all these meaningless things and wrong things. Don't say those things. So in order to stop the tongue from injuring other people, it is not for that purpose. To injure the sentiments of other people, the self-praise, the show-off, it is not for this purpose. These are the things which take away a person from righteousness and takes away from the quality of righteousness. And in this respect as well, we have to think over it very seriously. He says that Allah the Almighty, Iyyaka na'budu, He has commanded us that to say that we worship Allah Almighty. It was possible that a person should say, depending on his power, that seek, and along with that Allah Almighty has mentioned Iyyaka nasta'in, that don't think that the worship that which I do with my own strength, but it is because of the help of Allah Almighty. If the help of Allah Almighty is not there, and unless that holy God does not enable me to do that, nothing can be done. And if Iyyaka Nasta'in is not mentioned for this thing, because this indicates this Iyyaka Na'budu and Iyyaka Nasta'in has been mentioned for this, and this Taqwa is something which is sometime lack of Taqwa takes a person away from righteousness, and the tongue is there. One person goes away from Taqwa, and with tongue one becomes very arrogant, and Pharaoh-like qualities are created as a result of this tongue. And because of the tongue, hidden things are made for the people to show off. And he says that in one hadith it is mentioned that the person who is the limb of the body under the navel, if he cares about that, and the false, the spending the false wealth does not give that much harm, and eating something which is unlawful, and to say something which is unlawful, that gives. He says that what I mean to say is that a person who out of compulsion he eats pork, then it's something different. Allah Almighty has given the permission in case of desperate situation. But if somebody gives the edict that pork is lawful, if he makes this decision or says that, then he has gone far away from Islam, and he declares the unlawful thing as lawful, and that it shows that the harm of tongue is very great. So therefore the righteous person should control his tongue, and nothing such should always be said from him which is against the Taqwa. And you control your tongues, and not this thing that the tongues should control over you, and you go on talking everything good and bad. And Zikr-e-Ilahi, remembrance of Allah Almighty, should increase during the fast, and mostly the people do like that. And in this way one should reduce unnecessary talking, and so that one can fulfill the purpose of fasting. And then he says that one should see always that in goodness and righteousness how much we have done. The standard of that is the Holy Quran. Allah Almighty had mentioned about the righteous people, one of the quality that Allah Almighty delivers the person from the bad things of the life, and Allah Almighty looks after all his needs, as it says, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. That the person who has the fear of Allah Almighty creates a way out for him, and provides him the wealth and the provision in such way which he cannot imagine. And this is also a quality of righteousness, that Allah Almighty gives does not make him in need of those things which are bad, and Allah Almighty provides all the things which he need, and the bad inclinations or desires, they are not created in his heart, and he never thinks of that. This is also a quality of righteousness, that this is how Allah Almighty treats a righteous person. He said, if a shopkeeper thinks that instead without falsehood he cannot have the business, so he does not abstain from that, and he says that I am compelled to say wrong things. But the fact is, Allah Almighty looks after the righteous people and protects them from such occasions when a compulsion appears to be there that one should go against the truth, or one should say something which is false. Remember that if somebody leaves Allah, then Allah Almighty leaves that person. And when Rahman, God, leaves a person, then certainly Satan is going to develop his relationship. So he says that don't believe that Allah Almighty is weak. He is all powerful. When you depend upon Allah Almighty, then He definitely is going to help you. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. that who depends upon Allah Almighty, then Allah Almighty is good enough for all his needs. But those people who were the first addressee of these verses, and all these people were such who were all taking care of the religious things, and the worldly matters were left to God. So Allah Almighty assures them, gave them the this teaching that one of the blessing of the righteousness is that Allah Almighty delivers those people from vices who are righteous. If the righteousness is true, then the worldly anxieties and worries, Allah Almighty removes all those things from them, because these people are busy. There should no hindrance in the way of doing good things. And some people say that we have got some worldly problems and we cannot use the quality of righteousness. If the righteousness is there, then Allah Almighty solves all these problems and they are enabled to perform the good deeds. Hadhrat Massih explaining this point, he says that there are two things with the person who does perform the good deeds. He says that a person, the one he does the good things, the obligatory things and the optional things. One is the obligation which you have, and the one is the nafal, which is additional. First is that which is obligatory for the person. Like if you get the money, borrow the money, you have to pay back. That's the obligation. Or you have to do good thing in reply to good thing. And one should do the same and do justice to that. And this is not goodness. This alone is not the goodness that if somebody does good, then I should do good. So then this is this is actually, it is the right of other people and your obligation that you always do good to other people. And apart from these obligatory things, there are some optional, additional things which are more than the obligation. And like for example, in relation to kindness, you also show the kindness and you do the same thing. This is one thing good, equal. But another ihsan, another good thing is that is from the optional things, and these are the nawafil, which actually completes the actual obligation that you perform. And then the obligatory things come to the highest point when you do something more than what is made obligatory upon you. In hadith it is, hadith it is mentioned there that the nawafil are complementary to the obligatory thing. Those people who pay their zakat and give other contributions apart from that. So then Allah Almighty says that his friendship goes to that one, that I become his hands and feet and limbs, and has become his tongue through which he speaks. And he says the fact of the matter is that when a person is pure from selfish egos and selfishness, he leaves alone and he comes to Allah Almighty, and everything is pure and permissible and everything is done according to the commands of Allah. When the people suffer, then normally this thing is that their actions are not incompatible with the divine will and command. And the pleasure of Allah Almighty is opposed to that. So that person follows his passion. For example, in rage, he does something that there are some litigations after that and some cases against him in the court. But if somebody intends to that I have to follow the I will not take any action without consulting the book of Allah Almighty. And in every matter he would turn back to the book of Allah Almighty. Then certainly the direction of the book of Allah Almighty is that wala ratbin wala yabisin, that illa fi kitabim mubin, that means that in every wet and dry, everything is there, and the mention of that is in this brilliant book. And that means that Allah Almighty has mentioned everything good and bad, and the one who depends on that, he will be safeguarded. So he says that if we intend to that we will seek the guidance from the book of Allah, then they will get the guidance in worldly matters and the trials that people confront whenever they do anything wrong. So that is because they do not follow the commandments of Allah. They do not consult the Holy Quran without looking at that. When they go along with that, so then if they do anything without consulting the book, then they will get in trouble. Sometimes they are put into trial in religious matters. And Allah Almighty says that this period of trial is also to check the real faith of those righteous people. And the prophets, more than any other person, they are put into the situation of trial. So there are other worldly things, and the person falls into that situation when he thinks with the worldly thinking, and he claims to be right, but the path of righteousness, which is the Holy Quran for us, he does not follow that fully, and that person suffers in various trials. Anyway, he says that though the person who is following his emotions, then he is going to be in trouble. And this makes the point very clear that if under the compulsion of his passion a person does, then he suffers. And many a time he will be penalized. And as opposed to that, Allah Almighty says, the friends, those who walk and travel with me, they are free from that. And the more a person is less in his devotion to Allah Almighty, he is far away. But if his devotion to Allah Almighty is exactly as Allah Almighty has wished, then you cannot imagine the greatness of his faith. Allah Almighty says, Man adali waliyan faqad azantahu bil harb. That the one who confronts my friend, then actually he confronts me. Now you can see that such people, those who perform the good deeds, then Allah Almighty always supports his friend, and his opponents are committed to disaster and failure. And the righteous people, his status is so high. If the status of that is so high in the sight of Allah Almighty, so it becomes the friend of Allah. So then Allah Almighty will be always helping him in everything he does. And then there is a teaching that we should spend our life in modesty. This is the righteous people. There is a condition that they should spend their life in modesty, simplicity. And this is the branch of righteousness. And we have to confront the bad things. There are many people who say that we have known God Almighty. And for them, the last point is that they should have the fear of Allah. And from the arrogance and pride and rage, all these things, bad things are there. And because the displeasure of Allah Almighty will be there when a person gives the preference to his need over others. I don't wish my members of the community should consider some people low and some people high. If they should have any pride of that nature, then Allah Almighty knows who is big and who is small. This is one way of looking down upon people, one who has got this quality. And I'm afraid that this will grow like a seed and will destroy that person. So there are people who are very respectful when they meet the great people. Actually, great is that person who listens to a very modest person and listens to that carefully and respect that person and does not say anything annoying, which hurts the feeling. Allah Almighty says, فَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْإِثْمِ الْإِثْمُ الْفُسُوقُ بَعْدَ الْإِيمَانِ, that you do not give bad names to other people. After the faith, to go away from religion is something very bad. وَمَنْ لَمْ يُتُوبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And the one who does not repent and continues to do that, so then these are the people who are the transgressors from among the people. He says, so do not utter the name with a insult in that. If somebody does like that, he will not die unless he also suffers the same thing. And when you drink from the same fountain, then who knows who has got the more water in his faith? And one does not become respectable by himself, and it is by the grace of Allah that one becomes. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most respectable among you in the sight of Allah Almighty is that who is more righteous. And certainly Allah Almighty knows everything and fully aware of everything. So every Allah Almighty knows each and everything, and He knows everything. And if the people just show off the taqwa and whatever is Allah Almighty knows, one should have the fear. One should scrutinize oneself, evaluate oneself, and analyze oneself, and try to acquire the true taqwa, which Allah Almighty has mentioned that you adopt that quality. Explaining this point, and for a moment who follows the path of righteousness, how he gets the success, how he mentions that, and a non-believer, how he shows his happiness. And he says that always remember this principle, that moment's duty is that whenever some success is there, one is very much humbled and he prays to Allah Almighty. When Allah Almighty, he gets everything, he attributes it to Allah Almighty, that out of His grace He has given, and then he moves forward. And in every trial he is very steadfast and gets the real faith. And so in a way the success of both the believer and the non-believer is similar. But the success of the non-believer is the path of destruction. For the moment, more avenues of success opens, but not in that case in the non-believer. So the hard work and diligence and ability is given by God Almighty. If a moment turns to Allah Almighty, is inclined and gets a new introduction with Allah Almighty, and as such, after each and every success, he gets a renewed matter is there. Inna Allaha ma'allazina taqaw. Allah Almighty is with those people who are righteous. Yeah, always remember that the word of taqwa has been repeatedly mentioned in the Holy Quran. The meaning is done from the previous word. Here the ma, those people who give preference to Allah Almighty always prefers those people and protects them from all types of disgrace. Just the faith. I feel that if a person, if he wants to abstain from all types of disgrace and dishonor, the only remedy is that one should become righteous, then everything will be available. So all the successes of a believer will always take him further and further. So then he says that the condition of most of the people is mentioned in the books, that in the beginning they had some connection with the world and that was very close. But then they prayed and that was accepted. And after that their condition was totally changed. That is why one should not be very proudful at the acceptance of your prayer, but you should respect the honor of respect blessing of Allah Almighty. Allah Almighty accepted the prayer. That's why instead of boasting, you remember that this is all because of the graciousness of Allah. The principle is that when there is a success, then a person is encouraged and one should take benefit of that. And in that way one should try to increase in the full awareness of Allah Almighty. When there is a success, the prayer was accepted, then one should go in a recognition of Allah Almighty more and more. Because the greatest thing which is very useful is this true perception of Allah Almighty. And this is achieved by pondering over the nature and the attributes of Allah. And sometimes this poverty also puts a person into a difficulty. In Hadith it is mentioned that sometimes the poverty changes the faces, and sometimes a person goes away from religion because of the poverty. So I have seen many people, he says, that because of their poverty they became atheist, but the moment does not become like that. And he considers this misfortune as a result of his own mistakes, and when the time passes by and when his prayers are accepted, so then he does not forget that stage of modesty. If he believes that, then always follow the path of righteousness, whenever you have to do anything, and that person is blessed who acquires the quality of righteousness at the time of success, and that is very wretched who stumbles over there and goes away. And Allah Almighty has always helped those people who are righteous and adopt the quality of righteousness. Taqwa means that to abstain from vices, and muhsineen are those people that not only abstain from vices but they also perform the good deeds. They are the muhsin. And also he said, lillazina ahsanul husna, that you perform the good deeds in a very nice way. And explaining this verse, Inna Allaha ma'allazina attaqaw wallazina hum muhsinun, he's explaining this point. He says that this revelation came to me again and again. Inna Allaha ma'allazina attaqaw wallazina hum muhsinun. This revelation came again, and it has come so much that I cannot count how many. Maybe it is 2,000 times. The purpose is that so that the member of my community, they should know it fully, that they should not be happy only with this thing that we are a member of this community, or because of the good thinking we should be ready about the faith. The help of Allah will be acquired when you have the true righteousness and the good qualities are there. Inna Allaha ma'allazina attaqaw wallazina hum muhsinun. Its meaning of Allah Almighty is with those people who are who follow the righteousness and then they do something even better than that and favor to other people. And Allah Almighty's help will be granted to the people when there is true righteousness there. Inna Allaha ma'allazina attaqaw wallazina hum muhsinun. Allah Almighty makes a ledger of the good deeds of a person. So a person should also make a ledger of his own deeds, and one should think over that how far he is moving forward in goodness. Today should not, tomorrow should not be like today, and there should always be a progress. And if the 2 days are the similar, then he is in loss. One should be in the believer of Allah Almighty, so then he is never lost and never lost there, and all his desires are fulfilled. And he gives one example that a person, he was from the friends of Allah, he was suffering in a ship, he was traveling in a ship, and it was almost very close to drowning, but it was saved because of his prayer. And at that time he got the revelation that because of you we have saved all the people. But these are the things are not achieved just by verbal declarations, but with me Allah Almighty has given the promise, inni hafizu kulla man fid dar. But for this you people have to have the quality of righteousness, and for the acceptance of my prayers you also have to make capable of prayers, and only then my prayers will be accepted related to you, and that requires righteousness. Allah Almighty enable all of us during this Ramadan that to observe the fast with this quality of righteousness and fulfill all the requirements. And also in every respect this Ramadan should prove full of blessings for the community and for the Muslims and for the world, and particularly pray for all the people that Allah Almighty, the condition of the Ahmadis in Pakistan, and day by day difficulties are increasing. Allah Almighty show them the blessing, His blessings, and all these people are fulfilling the requirements of fasting and following the path of righteousness. They should be doing it, paying attention to the prayers, and Allah Almighty have mercy on the Muslims and their leadership. I should also be given the wisdom that they should become the believers of the Imam of the age, and also the worldly people. And every time we get the news that it's just about to start the war, and the big powers, it appears that the big powers, they are moving very fast towards the war. And it appears that there is no such thing which can say there is something hurdle coming in their way. And particularly the Muslims, and particularly the Ahmadis, Allah Almighty protect them from the ill effects of this war, and generally speaking all the mankind should be protected from there. If in the sight of Allah Almighty, if these people are worthy to be saved and reformed, then they should be doing that. So Allah Almighty create such condition that they recognize God and they could be safe guarded from their own